one of our producers asked us to talk about something real quick, and that is the B'nai Yosef North American Summit. Now, I know that Ken Rank and Pete Rambo, those guys really have it out for me. Those guys really don't like me. They don't like me because I've come against, Rob and I have talked against one of their teachings that basically the Jews, the way that I understand what they're saying is that the Orthodox Jews who are keeping Torah, they don't necessarily have Yeshua now, but since they believe in a coming Messiah, and since someday they will, realize that is Yeshua, essentially they're saved. So I've come out against that teaching because I think the Bible teaches against that teaching. So, and I've yesterday I saw a comment from Ken Rank on a post. He said that I was becoming the messianic. What did he say? Who's the Howard Stern? I'm becoming the messianic Howard Stern, which is interesting. If I could, if this radio show could bring in that much money, then so be it. But anyway, the point is that those guys really they have a thing out for me, which is funny because personally, I was watching some of Pete Rambo's stuff. I actually really like Pete Rambo. Obviously I disagree with him on some of his theology, especially now Pete Rambo is what I would consider an extreme two-houser. So he's him and Ken Rank both they're very much in the Batya Wooten camp and they've basically bought into the two-house theology hook, line, and sinker. And so obviously we're going to disagree on that. However, I can see why Ken Rank is so beloved within that vein of theology. He's very easy to listen to. He, he speaks very well. He just seems like I'd love to meet him face to face someday and have lunch with him. He seems like a real sweetheart and just a really nice guy to listen to and to talk to. So personally, I have nothing against these guys. They certainly seem to have something against me, which is, that's up to them, whatever. Anyway, so both these guys have talked about what's called the B'nai Yosef North American Summit. So I can tell that already they're going to be like, oh, here we go, Caleb Haig again on our theology. Well, actually, I want to read what this was from. This is called Breaking Israel News. I don't know if this is a legitimate news source or not. The only articles that I could find outside of what I think is the two-house movement was actually from one guy, and that's the guy who wrote this. I don't know. I think this guy is a non-believer, but I could be wrong. Anyway, he writes this. He says, this is from Breaking Israel News. You can find this in your show notes. He says, an entirely unprecedented event is taking place this weekend in Florida. The modest gathering of B'nai Yosef, that's sons of Joseph, could signal the beginning of a new relationship between Jews and Christians, transforming a millennium of mistrust into brotherhood and friendship. Okay, right there. Now, it's great that people are trying to bridge relations, and I know that people within the Messianic and Hebrew roots movements have been, and the Christian world, right? Bridges for Peace has been going since I was a baby, and there's other groups that have been trying to bridge the gap between Christianity and Judaism. I think the biggest gap that we're going to have within Christian, and this has nothing to do with B'nai Yosef North America Summit, and it has nothing to do with Messianic Judaism in general. But just as an overall whole, I think that believers in the Messiah Yeshua are going to have a hard time bridging a gap with the Orthodox Jews. And maybe that's the caveat, Orthodox Jews, maybe not so much the Reform, but I think Judaism, in the larger body of Judaism as a whole today, we're going to have a hard time bridging that gap because we have the divide of Yeshua. Yeshua and our belief that Yeshua is divine is that divide. And I think that while it is good to try to bridge gaps between non-believing Judaisms today and believers, whether it's Messianics or Christians today, I think that that's a worthy cause, but I think that it's an uphill battle. So whether or not this North American Summit is going to do that or not, hey, more power to them if they can try to bridge some kind of a gap. Anyway, he goes on. The stated goal of the B'nai Yosef North America Summit in Tampa, running from March 4th through the 6th, which just happened, is to focus the efforts of awakening Ephraimites in North America. This is a quote. I'm sorry. Quote. I think this is a quote from them. To quote, focus the efforts of awakening Ephraimites in North America toward a long-expected reunion with other Ephraimites and with Judah, end quote. Okay, so obviously this is bringing in now two-house theology, the split of Ephraim and Judah, the lost tribes of Ephraim versus the known tribes of Judah, which is now the nation of Israel as they see it. Okay. He goes on. The group defines Judah as, quote, the part of that nation which we know now as the Jewish people, which retained knowledge of its identity, and in 1948 returned to life as the state of Israel, end quote. Ephraimites are the, quote, non-Jewish Israelites descended spiritually, and that's an interesting caveat. Now, once again, I think this guy's an Orthodox Jew. I don't think that he's actually. I could be wrong on that, though. Maybe he's two-house as well. But I don't know if he's representing two-house theology, because I've never heard it described like this. Ephraimites, and he puts quote marks in this. Ephraimites are the, quote, non-Jewish Israelites descended spiritually from the northern kingdom of Israel. Interesting. Anyway, okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, they put that that caveat in there. And also, what I was just going to mention is on the side here, it says about the author. They said he made Aliyah in 91, and he serves in the IDF, you know.
That would make me assume that he's an Orthodox Jew, or that he's maybe not Orthodox, but he's Jewish, a non-believer, but maybe not.
Right.
Who knows?
He studied Jewish law and received rabbinical ordination in Israel.
So who knows what that means? I don't know. I would assume he's a non-believer, but maybe that's a horrible assumption to make. Okay, anyway, just one more paragraph here. This gentleman goes on. At this summit, they will choose a 12-member council of elders and a 7-member executive committee based on the first century congregation in Jerusalem, composed of 12 apostles and 7 deacons. This summit follows the first B'nai Yoseph National Congress conference held last May, in which over 130 delegates from 12 nations gathered in Ariel, Israel. European Ephraimites held a similar conference in Memmingen, Germany in January with a total of 60 representatives from 10 nations, indicating that the movement is slowly gaining momentum around the world. Okay, so basically, what else I read about this, I tried to do a little bit of research on this. The B'nai Yosef North American Summit, they chose this leadership, and then they all signed like this declaration of, it's an article of declaration, okay? And it has all these bullet points. You can find this in the show notes as well. And honestly, the bullet points, really what they're doing is they're promoting, I don't know. It sounds to me like they're just trying to bridge a gap between believers and the Jewish people. That is the physical descendants of Jacob. So, I mean, but their articles of faith are, we will submit to the will of God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so on and so forth. It's not like blatant, I'm not looking at this going like, okay, this is heresy or anything, nothing like that. It's just, it looks like something you would sign if your church was trying to enter a denomination or something, to be honest with you. I mean, that's kind of the way I see it. Anyway, so now Ken Rank, who thinks that I am becoming the Messianic Howard Stern, he says this on his blog. I'll read this just because he starts to give kind of a explanation of what happened. He says, "Have you ever stood before a sunset that was so magnificent, so majestic, so vivid that when you attempted to describe it, there were simply no words powerful enough to reproduce what your eyes had beheld? That is exactly how I feel when considering the events of this past weekend. I don't believe my vocabulary contains the needed words to articulate what I was so blessed to take part in. The B'nai Yosef North American Summit is a potential game changer. There is simply no better way to state that." 200 people, most of which considered themselves to be Ephraimites, by and large Christians who identify as part of Israel in the nations, gathered together from all over North America to define an identity and a common purpose. That goal did not fall short. And then he goes on to say, he describes the entire conference. He talks about the different teachers. Bacha Wooten was there. She spoke, even though she hasn't spoken in several years, so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm pretty confident that everyone thinks I am now going to take the next however long, 20 minutes to completely obliterate this conference. Actually, I'm not, because I don't really see anything wrong with it. I disagree with the idea of two-house theology, and I think everybody knows that. But if two Hausers want to get together and say, we're trying to bridge the gap between normative Judaism, whatever that might be, okay, and if you get a couple of guys from who are Jewish, Orthodox Jews like Hanok, who is there, and other people like that, Alaro is another guy who claims to be Orthodox Jew, but has basically preached a two-house message. So if you have these guys who are going to represent Judaism, which personally, I don't think that that's a good representation. But if that's your representation of Judaism over here, and then you have people who are going to come together and say, look, we represent the believing people within the two-house movement. We believe we're Ephraim. Let's bridge this gap. Let's all sign this thing that says that we're going to love the Jewish people and that we're trying to restore Israel and Judah and all this kind of stuff. Okay, I disagree with the theology of two-house, but at the same time, if that's what you want to do, and not only that, everybody says it was a great experience for them. Everybody seems to think that this was just a very, God was there and it was a very blessed time. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. In the same way, I would find this even more of a legitimate form of worship or whatever than possibly some of the Pentecostals who are going to be speaking in tongues openly, because that's clearly spoken against in the scriptures. This, although I disagree with two-house theology, these guys haven't come together and done something that is blatantly, against Scripture or anything. No, instead they're trying to bridge some kind of a gap. To be honest, I know that the people in the chat room are probably going to slaughter me for this, but I don't really see a big deal with this. If this is what they want to do and this is how they feel they're not only connecting to each other, but within their own theology, this is what they feel is going to give some gain, I don't have a problem with it.